Athens, 2042 A.D. She ripped the paper in half, then ripped the halves, then ripped what was left again into bits and pieces of history that could have been. Sierra Waters had once read that years ago it was thought that men made love for the thrill, while women made love for the sense of connection it gave them. Sierra had always done everything for the thrill. She had no sense of connection except to her work, which should have made her an ideal person for this job. Still, an ideal person would have followed the plan. It was written on the only substance that could survive decades, maybe longer, without batteries, which required only the light of the sun to be read, or the moon on a good night, or a flickering flame when there was no moon. Paper, a marvelous invention, thin and durable. And Sierra Waters had just torn it into little pieces, opened her palm, and given it to the wind to disperse in irretrievable directions. Earlier, New York City, A.D. 2042. Sierra was a doctoral student at the Old School in the heart of Manhattan. Her specialty was ancient Athens, or more precisely, the adoption of the Ionic alphabet by Athens around 400 B.C. She studied its impact on the future of the world. She studied Marshall McLuhan. A nice, tidy, manageable little topic, Thomas O'Leary, a member of her doctoral committee, had testily commented to Sierra, but he had agreed to help her anyway. Thomas was accustomed to unusual pursuits. He was an oddball himself, an independent scholar with no university affiliation. The Old School had a tradition of allowing one such outside expert on its doctoral committees. Sierra was making good progress on the dissertation, 72 out of a projected 250 pages, and written in under half a year's time, when Thomas called her down to his office just off Fifth Avenue and 18th Street on a slick, wet April evening. He had a copy of a slim manuscript, just a few pages in a worn manila folder. He hefted it as if to assess its intellectual weight. By the expression on his face, it looked to be quite important. He slid it across his pitted oak desk to Sierra. She had mixed feelings about this. It was no doubt an article of some sort that Thomas had come across and deemed relevant to her dissertation. Sierra hated the thought of having to rethink and rewrite any of her work at this point. On the other hand, she relished uncovering new information. It made her heart jump. She opened the folder. She looked up at Thomas, who was carefully regarding her, his mouth slightly pursed, a long pen of some sort dangling from his fingers like a plastic cigarette. "It's been apparently kicking around for a while," he said, "at least since the 20s. It recently surfaced at the Millennium Club up on 49th Street. Their librarian spotted it in an old bookcase sandwiched between the usual stuff." "The 2020s?" Sierra asked. Thomas smiled. "Well, it could have been the 1920s as far as that club goes. It was founded in the 1870s. But the librarian is sure it wasn't there before 2023. That was the last time they did a thorough inventory of their holdings. And the preface says something about carbon dating the original. So it's not an obvious forgery," Sierra said. "Otherwise, you wouldn't be showing it to me, right?" Thomas nodded. "So far, it looks damn good." Sierra looked back down at the manuscript. It was ancient Greek on the left side, English translation on the right. That was the logical assumption that the Greek was the original and English the translation. Not only because the Greek was ancient, but also because the words in front of her were apparently a fragment of a Platonic dialogue featuring his mentor, Socrates. Sierra looked up. "I've never seen this before." Thomas nodded again. "Apparently, neither has most of the rest of the world."
Entertainment Weekly says the plot to Save Socrates is challenging fun. The New York Daily News says it's a Da Vinci-esque thriller. And Curled Up with a Good Book says Sierra Waters is sexy as hell. You can find out more about The Plot to Save Socrates by Paul Levinson at theplot2savesocrates.com.